Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of the Articulate Fly, and we're back with another Southwest Virginia fishing report with Matt Reilly. How you doing, Matt?
Doing great, Marvin. How are you?
As always, just trying to stay out of trouble, and looks like spring is coming to Southwest Virginia, right?
Yeah, it's been here once and left, and it's coming back now permanently. I think we in the mid 60s today, and sunshine, and frisky fish. So hopefully we're just getting started.
Yeah, so wind down the muskie season. Probably got a little bit of that left, but then it's really all about pre-spawn smallmouth, right?
Yeah. We still have on most of the rivers we still have mid 40 degree water temperatures. They're creeping up maybe to high 40s in the afternoons. But we've got consistently kind of lows overnight around, high 30s, 40s. And so I think we've probably, for guys wanting to musky fish, it's probably another week left. I tend to shut it down completely regardless by like the first of spring. But I've got a couple left that we're going to squeak in because we've got the good water temps. And, and then we'll be on the smallmouth train for 8 or 9 more months after that.
Yeah, and so, what should folks expect to see if they want to get out and try to chase some pre-spawn smallies?
Yeah, so, everybody's just kind of popping out a winner at the moment. I really consider pre-spawn to probably start in the 46 to 48 degree range. As things are warming up and approaching 50 degrees. And so they're still going to be, near their wintertime habitat and just kind of starting to spread out a little bit. So, instead of being in the really specific spots that they've spent the last several months in, they'll start to spread out a little bit. Still probably going to need to fish pretty slow, close to the bottom or on the bottom. And, don't expect big numbers this time of year. This is the time of year for, bigger average size trophy, heavy, winter pre-spawn fish. But you're probably not going to hit any big numbers this time of year. So I would say, in general, look for, slower, deeper water, kind of adjacent to areas that they can kind of transition into spawning habitat in, and just start fishing, sort of finessey kind of crayfish stuff close to the bottom and real slow and see what happens.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, you like to fish your crayfish on a floating line, right?
I do, yeah. That might make me different than others, but that's my preference, especially in our shallow rivers.
Yeah. And I would say too, I would imagine, as the things are warming up, you're probably just starting to get really good spring hatches on the trout front too, right?
Yeah. Any day now I'd expect to see, any day now if I was out trout fishing, so smallmouth fishing, I'd expect to see Quill Gordons popping off. Probably not, so we're recording on a Tuesday. Tomorrow's Wednesday, and we're supposed to see anywhere from a quarter to a half an inch of rain and clouds all day. Those are not the days we tend to see those bugs. They tend to be real nice days like we'll have later this week that are, warm and, sunshiny and just real pleasant to be out. So those days, mid to late March can really be some of the best trout fishing, coming out of winter into spring.
Yeah, and the great thing is those bugs are pretty big too.
Yeah, they're not tiny. You're looking at like a 12 or a 14 dry, and then I do about the same as a nymph. Usually something somewhat generic but dark bodied, like a pheasant tail. Do a fair amount of dry fly fishing in the afternoon if we see the bugs being pretty active and fish coming up, but a lot of spring hatches, you're still going to catch more fish on the nymphs than the dry fly. So just knowing that those bugs, are starting to get active and should be coming off any time now, you can kind of start shifting your nymph selection in that direction a little bit and start picking up a lot more fish.
Yeah, and soft tackles won't hurt you either.
No, not at all. That's a great point.
Yeah. And so we've got a great question for you. It's kind of interesting. The guy's avatar is like the mammoth, and he apparently has moved from Jackson Hole to Southwest Virginia, been an angler for the last 10 years, and he's new to the region and kind of wanted to get your feel for what he should expect, in terms of differences in pattern and presentation for trout. But then also he brought his Clackacraft East and wanted to know good places to use it because he sees a lot of rafts on the river in Southwest Virginia.
Yeah, I'll kind of tackle the latter part of that question first. As far as trout fishing goes, I mean, you can get away with a drift boat on most of our smallmouth rivers if they're full, which they will be this spring. And then as long as you're aware of, the various, water features, like on the new, we've got, several class 3, pushing class 4 waterfalls and ledge systems. So some of those I wouldn't be too keen on taking a drift boat through, but, as long as you know where those are, you should be fine on the James and the new. And then, as far as trout streams go, I mean, we really don't have very many big floatable trout streams. We have the Jackson River in Western Virginia that is floatable with a drift boat, with certain flows. And then depending on where you are in Southwest Virginia, the South Olson and Watauga tailwaters in Tennessee aren't too far away, and those are definitely floatable on a drift boat. So those, from a trout fishing standpoint would be my, top recommendations. But you do see a lot of rafts in this area of the country just because, we do have low summertime flows pretty regularly, very rocky, relatively ledgy, high gradient rivers. And, raft is just a little bit more conservative and allows you to go a little bit further. And then in terms of differences, I'm not sure I'm 100% qualified to compare our fishery to one that I'm not super familiar with, but, I would say on average, we may not have the dry fly hatches like folks out west are used to, or and maybe not even the density of trout in our streams, particularly our small streams, brook trout streams, tend to be relatively infertile. Some of them have a lot of fish in them, but, some of them, particularly in the far southwestern portion of the state, you might have a couple of fish in a really good pool and that's it. And so, I would say maybe in general, you might consider fishing a little bit faster if you're on foot. And then just, picking, we have a stoneflies, and, caddis larvae, those kinds of things are in almost every trout stream that we have, and they'll almost always catch fish. So I would say, just as a starting point to kind of fill a box with some of those, anytime, all-purpose kind of nymphs, and then just, find fish. And then, as you spend time on different pieces of water, you'll kind of pick up on, certain insect life cycle events that are important to different streams, and specific insects that might be heavier on some than others. But that's about all I feel like I'm qualified to say in comparison.
Yeah, and I would say, the only thing I could possibly add to that would be that, you probably would see the most similarities in our tailwaters, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, most tailwaters are pretty similar. They're going to be really heavy on things like midges and crane fly larvae and black fly larvae. And, then you may have, for instance, the South Holston has a really prolific sulfur hatch in the summertime. You'll have big numbers of bugs and certainly more so than on most of our trout streams.
Yeah. And, folks, we love questions on the articulate fly. You can email them to us. You can drop them in the comments on our social media posts on Facebook or Instagram, or DM us on Facebook or Instagram. And if we use your question, I will send you some articulate fly swag. And we were drawing for something cool for Matt at the end of the season. And, Matt, like we always do, we're always interested in what you're writing for the Rural Virginian this week.
Yeah. So, interestingly, I have similar articles coming out in the newspaper and on the DWR blog that they put out, every month this week. Both of them are on vernal pools, which are sort of ephemeral, ponds or puddles, of water that fill up in the spring and tend to be dry in the summer and fall. But they're an important focal point for a lot of amphibian life cycles. So, a couple weeks ago, things started getting a little bit warm. We started to see some of those warm spring rains. To start to see critters like wood frogs and spring peepers and spotted salamanders all moving towards these vernal pools. So, got 2 articles on that coming out this week.
Well, very cool. I will drop links to those in the show notes. And, I know you're pretty booked up for pre-spawn smallmouth, but you want to let folks know what you got for the summer if they want to come and sort of sweat in Southwest Virginia. You say it's not as hot as Central Virginia, so I'll take your word for that. But I suspect you've got some slots deeper into the summer. Yeah,
for sure. There's a couple days left in May and June, and then, really looking at summertime at this point. But, 30-year prime, top water, summer, visual kind of fishing is still pretty wide open. So I've got maybe a dozen or 2 days booked across those 3 months at this point, but a lot of good days still open. So if that's what you're interested in, we'll get you set up.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, listen, folks, you owe it to yourself to get out there and catch a few. Tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, Matt.
Thanks, Marvin.